Imagine this. You're working your shift at a small pizza shop like you've done for decades. You get a call, grab 2 pizzas, drive to the address given, and within minutes, you've got a massive steel collar bomb locked around your neck. The people who put it there, they hand you pages and pages of scavenger hunt instructions and tell you to rob a bank. Not a movie, not a TV script. This happened. This is the story of Brian Wells, the so-called pizza bomber, and it's one of the strangest, cruelest, most bizarre cases the FBI has ever seen. And the deeper you go into it, the stranger it gets, because the cast of characters behind it, they're straight out of a twisted soap opera. Hey friends, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. Get cozy, grab a snack, grab a drink, because today's case is going to take us down one of the weirdest rabbit holes in true crime. We are covering the pizza bomber case. If you've seen Netflix's Evil Genius, you already know how wild this gets. If you haven't, oh boy, this one's got everything. Eccentric masterminds, FBI standoffs, impossible puzzles, and a man whose ordinary life ended in the most shocking way imaginable. While we dive into this today, I will be playing a little bit of Stardew Valley, a classic cozy little game. Before we dive in, I just want to say a quick disclaimer. This case involves death, coercion, and disturbing details. Please take care of yourself while listening. If you need a break, that is totally okay. I'll also leave the resources in the description. And just another note, I have researched this case through websites, records, trial transcripts, reports, and obviously the documentaries, but even the experts don't agree on every detail in this case. My job is to lay out the facts as best as I can, and I'd love to hear your thoughts at the end, because trust me, by the time we're done, you will have an opinion. So, who was Brian Wells? Brian was born in 1956 and he lived his entire life in Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie's the kind of place that used to be bustling with industry, shipping, manufacturing, but by the early 2000s it had slowed down. A lot of people lived modest lives there, paycheck to paycheck. Brian fit right into that picture. He worked at Mamma Mia's pizzeria for about 10 years. Some experts said 30, but 10 years is still a long time to be delivering pizza. He was loyal, dependable, and he always showed up. He wasn't married, no kids, and he lived alone with his cats. He didn't have a flashy lifestyle. He liked word puzzles, TV, spending time at home. His co-workers said he was polite but reserved. He wasn't the kind of guy to cause trouble. One person described him as gentle and almost shy, and that's why people who knew him were stunned when they turned on the news that day. To them, Brian was just ordinary. Quiet life, quiet routines, and that's what makes what happened next feel so unbelievable. How does a man like that end up at the center of a bank robbery with a bomb strapped to him? Well, let's walk through it. So, it's August 28th, 2003. Brian clocks in at Mamma Mia's. He's doing what he's always done, delivering pizzas around Erie. Around 1:30 p.m, a call comes in. 2 pizzas, a sausage, and a pepperoni, to be delivered to an address on Peach Street. Now, here is the weird part. That address wasn't even a house. It wasn't a business. It led to a TV transmission tower at the end of the dirt road. They said that they were construction workers working on the site at the time. It was definitely odd, but Brian didn't question the order. So he grabs the pizzas and heads out. What exactly happened at the tower is debated. Investigators believe he was ambushed. Some conspirators later claimed Brian knew something about the plan, but thought it was fake. What we know for sure, Brian was forced into a contraption unlike anything police had ever seen. A steel collar bomb. Heavy, locked with multiple clamps and plates, impossible to remove. On top of that, conspirators had handed him a binder of instructions. It wasn't just one page. It was 9 pages long. The instructions laid out a scavenger hunt across Erie. Step 1. Rob the PNC Bank and collect $250,000. Step 2. Drive to a McDonald's parking lot, find a note hidden by a sign. Step 3. That note would send him to a wooded area where another clue was hidden. Step 4. Continue following notes, collecting keys until eventually he'd supposedly have the right combination to unlock the bomb. But here's the thing. Investigators later tested it. There wasn't enough time. Even if Brian had sprinted through every step, he couldn't possibly have finished before the timers ran out, which meant the scavenger hunt wasn't about saving him. It was about buying time, keeping him busy, and making it look to anyone watching like he was a willing participant. And if that sounds cruel, just wait until you hear what happened when Brian actually walked into the bank. So now it's 2:30 in the afternoon on the same day. Brian walks into a PNC Bank in Erie. He's holding a cane, which is actually a shotgun disguised as a walking stick, which is crazy. Around his neck, hidden under his shirt at first, is the collar bomb. So when he walked in, his shirt was kind of up like this to kind of hide the bomb, I suppose. He hands the teller a note demanding $250,000. The note warns that the bomb will detonate if police are called or if they stall. But the teller can't give him that much because banks don't have that much cash available, at least to the regular employee. So she hands him $8,702 instead. And here's where it gets strange. Brian doesn't panic. He doesn't shout. Surveillance footage shows him almost casual, calm even. At one point, he even puts a lollipop in his mouth. He walks out with the money, gets into his car and drives away. Not racing, not screeching tires, just calmly following the script. Was he calm because he thought that he could beat the scavenger hunt? Or was he in shock, just going through the motions? We may never know. What we do know is that within minutes, police had him surrounded. And that's when everything spiraled into tragedy. Brian didn't make it far. Police stopped him in a nearby parking lot. They pulled him from the car, handcuffed him, and then realized what was around his neck. Brian pleaded with them. He said he was a hostage. He said the bomb was real, that he had been forced into this. It's going to go off. Police called the bomb squad, but Erie only had one team, and they were miles away. So Brian sat there on the pavement in handcuffs, surrounded by officers, news cameras, and onlookers. For 25 minutes, he begged for help. And then the device starts to beep. Officers scrambled back, and in a horrifying moment, broadcast live on local TV, the collar exploded. Brian Wells was killed instantly, but the horror didn't end there, because the device was welded and locked in place. Investigators couldn't just remove it even after Brian had passed away. To even transport his body, even though they knew the bomb was now safe because it had exploded, to even be able to do an autopsy or anything like that, they actually had to decapitate him at the scene to get the collar bomb off of him. It's one of those details that doesn't get talked about often, but it shows how devastating this was. For Brian, for the officers who had to do it, and for his family who had to live with that knowledge. And if you think that was the worst of it, the people behind this plot were even darker. One of them literally had a body stashed in his freezer. After Brian's death, the scene was chaos. Police were rattled, the public was horrified, and the FBI and ATF immediately descended on Erie. The first thing they examined was the device itself. And this wasn't some sloppy, thrown together pipe bomb. Investigators described it as meticulously engineered. It had multiple layers of steel, several locking mechanism, 4 separate keyholes, decoy wires designed to confuse anyone trying to disable it, and 2 kitchen timers, 1 electronic and 1 wind-up, that served as redundancies. One ATF agent later said, "This was the most complex, improvised explosive device we had ever seen." Then there were the instructions. 9 pages, typed neatly, full of detailed directions. They weren't vague. They told Brian exactly where to go, what to do, and how much time he had. Here's just a sample of how bizarre they were. After the robbery, he was told to drive to a McDonald's parking lot, find a note hidden by a sign. That note would lead him to a wooded area with another clue, step after step across town like some twisted scavenger hunt. But FBI agents quickly realized something. The timing didn't work. Even if Brian had sprinted through every step, he couldn't possibly finish before the timers ran out, which meant the scavenger hunt wasn't about saving him. It was about buying time, keeping him busy, and making it look, to anyone watching, like he was a willing participant. And the deeper investigators dug, the stranger it got. Because Erie, Pennsylvania was hiding some characters that feel like they walked out of a crime novel. So let's now go ahead and meet the so-called masterminds. First, there is Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong. Marjorie was highly intelligent. She had a master's degree in education, and people said she could out-argue anyone. She also battled severe mental illness, diagnosed with bipolar disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. She was manipulative, controlling, and violent. Over the years, several of her romantic partners had died under suspicious circumstances. Prosecutors later described her as brilliant but dangerous. Then there was Kenneth Barnes. Barnes was a local crack dealer, a friend of Marjorie's. He was later described as someone who could be bought off easily, someone always looking for a payday. He admitted to knowing about the robbery scheme and eventually testified against Marjorie. And then there's the strangest of them all, Bill Rothstein. Rothstein was eccentric, intelligent, and thought of himself as an engineer. He lived less than 2 miles from the TV tower where Brian had been collared. But here's where it gets dark. Just weeks after the robbery, Rothstein placed a call to 911. Yes, this is Bill Rothstein at my residence, 8645 Peach Street. There's a body in the freezer. Yes, his own freezer. When police arrived, they found the body of James Roden, Marjorie's ex-boyfriend. Marjorie had shot him during an argument. Rothstein later claimed he was only helping her cover it up. He framed himself as a bystander, not a killer. And somehow, he avoided major charges. So think about that. Here's a man who calls 911 on himself, admits there's a body in his freezer, and still walks away without real punishment. And that man is now linked to one of the most complex bomb plots the FBI had ever seen. And wait until you hear what Marjorie said in court, because her rants alone could fill a whole documentary. So this brings us to the central debate. Was Brian Wells in on it, or was he an innocent victim? The FBI's stance was complicated. Their official conclusion was that Brian had some level of involvement. They believed he had agreed to be part of a robbery scheme, thinking the bomb would be fake, just a prop. Kenneth Barnes testified that Brian knew about the plan ahead of time. According to him, Brian thought he'd walk into the bank, grab the money, and then split it with the others. But here's the twist. The others may have double-crossed him. They locked a real live bomb on his neck, knowing it would kill him. Brian's family never accepted the idea that he was involved. His sister told reporters Brian was not that type of person. He was tricked. He was a victim. And when you look at the scavenger hunt, their point makes sense. If survival was impossible from the start, then Brian was never meant to make it out alive. He wasn't an accomplice, he was disposable. Even the way he acted at the bank, calm, almost resigned, could suggest that he thought it was just a game, or that he believed he had a real shot at surviving. So, what do you think? Was Brian a co-conspirator who didn't realize he'd been set up? Or was he an innocent man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Either way, the truth came out in court, and the courtroom scenes were as wild as the crime itself. In 2007, nearly 4 years after the crime, indictments were finally handed down. Kenneth Barnes pled guilty to charges including conspiracy and weapon violations. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, but later had his sentence reduced after cooperating with investigators. Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong went to trial in 2010, and if you think she was manipulative outside of court, you should have seen her inside. She was combative with prosecutors, snapped at judges, and delivered long, rambling rants about conspiracies. At one point, she insisted the FBI was framing her. At another, she accused the media of twisting her words. In the end, the jury wasn't convinced. She was convicted of armed bank robbery, conspiracy, and using a destructive device in a crime. Her sentence: life in prison plus 30 years. Marjorie died of cancer behind bars in 2017, still insisting she had been wronged. And what about Bill Rothstein? He never faced trial. He died of cancer in 2004, just months after Brian's death. To this day, many believe he took secrets with him to the grave. So the official line from the FBI is case closed. Conspirators identified, some punished, some dead. The public wasn't satisfied, because this case wasn't just solved and forgotten. It exploded all over again, years later, thanks to Netflix. In 2018, Netflix released Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist. The documentary reignited interest worldwide. People who had never heard of Brian Wells suddenly found themselves debating, victim or accomplice? The show leaned into Marjorie's chaotic personality, her courtroom outbursts, her manipulations. It painted Rothstein as the quiet mastermind, pulling strings behind the scenes. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and true crime blogs picked up the story again. And even now, 20 years later, people are still asking, what really happened that day? Because this wasn't just a bank robbery. It was a story of manipulation, betrayal, and cruelty. It was a case where an ordinary man's quiet life ended in an extraordinary, horrifying fashion. And whether he was guilty or innocent, one fact remains. Brian Wells died terrified, with a bomb strapped around his neck, in front of the world. And that image has never left Erie, or anyone who has studied this case. So, what do you think? Was Brian Wells completely innocent, a man tricked into something he didn't understand, or was he partly involved, thinking it was all fake, helping this group get a paycheck, and he didn't realize until it was too late? Personally, I'm so stuck, but I'm maybe leaning more towards victim. His life doesn't scream criminal mastermind, and the scavenger hunt feels like proof he was never supposed to survive. But I'd love to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe he was a pawn or a player? Either way, this case is unforgettable. It's bizarre, it's tragic, and it's a story I don't think anyone could shake once they've heard it. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this deep dive. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, subscribe if you want more true crime and gaming stories, and stay curious, stay safe, and take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one. Bye!